Good Tuesday morning to you. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion. We started off the week. We've got earnings really in the focus, but what grabbed everybody's attention, of course, was Bitcoin and all the volatility over the weekend as we went into the weekend from Friday, and then you looked at Saturday and all of that. A lot of attention getting pointed in that direction for a lot of the right reasons, and it is very volatile. That was the topic, it seemed, of the day everywhere that I went, including a lot of the media that I was covering throughout the day. So the NASDAQ definitely had some pressure. It was above 14,000, but midway through the day, we found ourselves towards the lows. We got a little bit off of those lows, but still finished off about 1% or close to 150 points to the downside. The Dow just kind of floated around and hung around. It was choppy, but in a very, very tight range, finishing down about 100 and a quarter. Volatility remained right where it's been, somewhere in the middle to low 17s. And that's where we were. But I'll tell you what, you take a look at the price of crude, and it's still been hanging around above 60. As a matter of fact, trading somewhere above 63 of late. So that's been something as well. But the leadership role in the markets was also the leadership role to group to the downside in the markets as well, especially yesterday. Consumer discretion, that was one of them for sure. Technology, another one, down about 1% yesterday. You had biotech getting hit for about 2%. The SMH, the semiconductors, that was down about 2.5%. So you could see exactly where some of that leadership was coming from that was leading us to these record highs, also pulling us off of those record highs yesterday, and some follow through today as well. I'll point that out in just a second for you. But some of the strength that we did see in the market yesterday, you had Coke with their earnings, you had Walgreens, you had Apple, you had some Netflix, you had some of the financials were trading pretty decent. It was Morgan Stanley, it was Schwab, it was Bank of New York. So that was trading pretty nicely. Some weakness, though, in other areas of the marketplace. I mentioned the semis, the chips. You had Intel, but throw in some of the industrial names. You had a Boeing in there, as a matter of fact. And then you start looking at some of the other names, Moderna and Peloton and DocuSign and all this. And it all just sort of adds up to the kind of day that we had, which was a little bit slower. We traded about 33 million contracts yesterday, so a little bit off of where we were last week, where we closed out the week over 40 million contracts. But as earnings continue to roll on, and that's exactly what we are seeing today, more roll on from last night and this morning. Some of the earnings had some beats. We had AutoNation. They beat. You look at IBM, you look at Procter & Gamble, you look at Lockheed Martin, you look at Travelers, J&J, all of these names. You had all beats, and in some cases, very, very strong beats. One of the consistencies that we are getting right now, however, is everybody's talking about price increases offsetting some of these commodity costs and inflation. And just look no further than a Procter & Gamble or a Kimberly-Clark and some of these various names. They're all sort of hitting on the same theme, which is, hey, look, we're going to have to start raising some of these prices. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. By the way, Kansas City Southern, certainly a standout today because the continued interest from Canadian rails is continuing to push. And with that push, that stock was up about 15% last I looked, but that was earlier on in the session. So as we got into the pre-market, we're down pretty significantly, but nothing huge. Down about 130 points for the Dow. NASDAQ just a little bit, 30 points or so. We opened a little bit better. We were down less than 100 points as far as the Dow. Then we started to shift back down 100 points. Last I looked, we were trading down about 150 points, and that's 1 hour into the day. And we were starting to see a slide in the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ actually got into green, and it was looking pretty solid early on, close to 9 o'clock East Coast time, first half hour, but then started to slide. We started to see a little bit of a push. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give a little quick down 54 right now for the NASDAQ. So it's starting to accelerate a little bit to the downside as well. So the sectors today, the weakness that we are seeing, energy was down 2% very early. Financials were down about 1% very early. Where were we seeing any strength? A lot of those high multiples, but that's starting to probably come in as we're watching the NASDAQ, because most of those names, NASDAQ names, getting pulled down to the downside, I'm sure, with the NASDAQ itself. But you had Okta, you had DocuSign, you had Twilio, CrowdStrike. Those are the kinds of names, those high multiple names that we talk about oftentimes. And those names actually did have a little bit of strength. We also had Apple and Tesla and Netflix showing a little bit of strength early. But as I say, that's when the NASDAQ was closer to flat, now down about 50 points. We've got two unusuals for you today. And by the way, we got the cash flow portfolio coming up in about an hour or so as well. But I've got two unusuals for you guys right now. I got Square, number one, SQ. Now, this name's pretty interesting. It was trading around 250, and it's very short term. These expire on Friday, April 23rd. But a buyer of the 250 strike calls paying $4.40 all the way up to $6. These are not cheap. And listen to me when I tell you this. So in other words, let's just put it out there that they were $4. They're essentially going to lose about $1 a day if the stock just sat right where it is. So just understand that's part of the theta, because these do expire in 4 days. You've got today all the way through Friday. That's it. So it's got to be somewhere above 250 and maybe even above. If you're paying for that premium, you're paying even a little bit more. You've got to have this stock make a fairly decent move in a fairly short period of time. That's just part of the educational process that you have to understand about the options world. Secondly, QSR, quick serve. So this is Restaurant Brands. It's always been pretty interesting. Stock today trading just underneath 66. It was trading 65.93 or 98. And we had a pretty significant buyer of 3,000 of the May 67.5 calls. Here's the interesting part. By the way, they're paying about $1.25 for those. Here's the interesting part. The buyer of those was also at the same time selling a downside put. What does that really mean? It means that they are very bullish and looking for a move to the upside because they are selling the put to the downside. By the way, stock falls apart, they're going to be forced to buy the stock at that strike with whatever premium they were able to sell those for. But just understand that as well. So it's not as complicated as it might sound. If you need a little education, obviously the guys here at Market Rebellion will help you out in any way, shape, or form because you need to know the options world. But I will say what we are seeing there with the buying of the calls and selling of the puts, that's a very bullish trade looking for, and that does include the earnings cycle as well that's coming out for QSR. So keep an eye on that. Folks, have a great day of trading. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And then tomorrow, got a kind of a busy day. Then I've got the noon show and the 5 p.m. show as well with Fast Money. So going to be a busy day, but I look forward to seeing you then. Until then, have a great day of trading.